Know that I got it made. Know that I got it made. Know that I got it made. I'm taking it back when rap was real back in the old days. Know that I got it made. Know that I got it made. I'm taking it back when
Greetings, YouTube. A lion unleashed back at you from right here at the Green Thumb Gardening Channel, right here in Grow Zone 8B in Tifton, Georgia. And in this evening's video, YouTube, I'm super excited to bring you guys along with me as I show you guys how we go about propagating our fig tree cuttings. It's a quick and simple, easy procedure. Anyone can do it, whether you're a gardener or not. Trust me, you can successfully propagate fig tree cuttings using this method. Hang tight, YouTube.
All right, YouTube, we're back. Here we have our potting mix. It's a combination of Miracle Grow garden soil, Miracle Grow potting soil, and composted oak tree leaves, bark, and tree branches. As you can see, it's quite a rich and fertile soil medium, although it is at the same time quite loose, loamy, and well draining, YouTube. And that's precisely what you want to use when you're trying to propagate fig tree cuttings. A lot of people use cocoa coir and peat moss and all of that stuff. Maybe it works well for them. We found that here in the Grow Zone 8B at the Green Thumb Gardening Channel, the best mix that we found so far is what we currently have here before us, YouTube. At any rate, this is indeed our potting mix that we're going to use to propagate our Celeste fig tree cutting with. Here, YouTube, in this glass of water is our one Celeste fig tree cutting that we've taken. We've carefully washed this cutting thoroughly, YouTube, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. But we do believe that by thoroughly washing our cuttings prior to planting them, we're removing any fungus or bacteria that may have grown on these cuttings while it was on the tree during the spring, summer months, or whenever you took your cutting or whatever, YouTube. At any rate, YouTube, this is indeed our cutting. This is the pot that we intend to propagate our Celeste fig tree cutting in. As you can see, it's about a half-gallon container here, YouTube. We have a 1-gallon Ziploc bag here, YouTube. We have our trusty Scuttles garden spray bottle here. We have our trusty Scuttles garden shovel here. We have our trusty Scuttles garden shears here that I've already taken the liberty of sterilizing. And here we have an organic rooting hormone that we're going to use to attempt to propagate our Celeste fig tree cutting, YouTube. I'm going to simply start by filling our container with our potting mix. And again, as you can see, guys, this, although it is a rich and fertile mix, there's lots of tree bark, partially broken down leaves, pieces of wood in here, and again, our Miracle Grow potting soil and our Miracle Grow garden soil is all combined in this soil mixture. I'm going to tap that down a little bit to settle that soil in this pot. Come back, add another scoop to this pot, YouTube. Again, it's a quick and simple procedure, and anybody can do this, YouTube. You do not have to be a gardener or a botanist or horticulturist or anything like that to propagate fig tree cuttings. When it comes to fruit trees, I can promise you, fig trees are one of the easiest fruit trees to propagate. Now, we pressed our soil out in this pot slightly. We didn't compact it in this pot. We don't want our soil to be compacted. We'll allow the water that we use to water our cutting with to settle the soil around our cutting. We're going to move our pot back over to our table here, YouTube. And again, as you see, we have about an 8 to 10 inch cutting from our Celeste fig tree, from the same Celeste fig tree that we sourced our own Celeste fig tree cutting from last year. Mrs. Lori out there, you can see she's bare out there this time of year out there. But we sourced these Celeste fig tree cuttings from the same source that we sourced our Celeste fig tree, Mrs. Lori, from. And you guys have been following the video series on that Celeste fig tree, saw how well it produced during its first year here in our front yard garden extended grow area after we propagated that Celeste fig tree cutting in our makeshift greenhouse last season, YouTube. I'm going to pause this camera for a minute, show you guys how I go about preparing the end of our cuttings to receive the rooting hormone. And I'll show you what that looks like when I get it done, YouTube. Hang tight. Alright, YouTube, we're back. As you guys can see, I've simply taken my trusty Scuttles garden shears and I've simply removed part of the bark from the lower part of this Celeste fig tree cutting. We took that all the way down to that Cambrium layer below the surface of the beneath the bark on this particular cutting, YouTube. We did that where there was actually growth nodes previously. We did that along where the growth nodes were previously, because that's the places on your Celeste fig tree cuttings or any type of fig tree cuttings where roots are most likely to sprout from first. Came up to that second growth node here, YouTube, and did that same thing, taking it down to that Cambrium layer there, YouTube. See how we did that? And what we're typically going to do here, YouTube, is take this cutting, stick it back in this water, allow those cut edges to get saturated with our water here well, and take our organic rooting hormone here. I'm going to shake the excess water from this cutting, YouTube. It doesn't need to be dripping water or anything like that. Take our cutting, stick it in this bottle of rooting hormone, YouTube. I'm going to shake that around in there a little bit and make sure that we get everything that we were trying to get coated with that rooting hormone actually coated in there, YouTube. Right. I'll show you guys what that looks like now. I'm going to simply pull our Celeste fig tree cutting out of our rooting hormone. That's what it looks like. As you can see, we coated all of those areas that we previously shaved this cutting down to the Cambrium layer there, YouTube. You see it's white all the way around. I'm going to tap that excess rooting hormone off of this cutting. And set our cutting to the side for a minute and allow that rooting hormone to soak in very well there. I'm simply going to take my finger, YouTube, and poke a hole in the center of this pot. The soil is slightly moist, but the hole shouldn't collapse in on itself. We're going to take our Celeste fig tree cutting, stick it down in the soil in this pot, at least down to the point where we remove that bark and coated it with that rooting hormone. We want at least all of that part down in the soil. Now we're simply going to take our soil and collapse it down around our cutting. Again, YouTube, this is very simple. Anyone can, do not have to be a gardener to do this, YouTube, or a botanist. Alright, YouTube, now that we have that step complete, we're almost done with all that it takes to actually successfully propagate a fig tree cutting, YouTube. Now we have our fig tree cutting in our pot, YouTube. I'm going to take this same glass of water that I soaked that fig tree cutting in. Give our cutting a little drink of water. We're not trying to completely soak that soil or anything like that. We just need a little bit of soil, little moisture in our soil during the time that it takes for our cutting to sprout roots. Next up, YouTube, and this is the last step, we're simply going to take this 1 gallon Ziploc bag here, place it over this pot with this cutting in it, and I'll show you what that looks like once I get that done. Hang tight. Alright, YouTube, we're back, and this is what our Celeste fig tree looks like in this pot with the plastic bag over it. You guys see that? What we're simply going to do now is take these edges, YouTube, and pinch those edges as closed as we possibly can. They don't have to be sealed airtight or anything like that. That's completely unnecessary, YouTube. And that's it, YouTube. As you can see, I actually just pinched those edges of this bag together so that it would hold tightly around this pot and not collapse on top of our cutting there in this pot, YouTube. But this is indeed what it looks like, YouTube. The next step is simply to take this particular pot and place it in a location that doesn't receive direct sunlight. Again, that is indeed what it looks like, YouTube. Our next step is simply to take this pot and place it in a location where it would not receive direct sunlight. And what better place to do that than in our high tonal greenhouse around here, YouTube. We already have about 16 to 17 Celeste fig tree cuttings currently being propagated here in our greenhouse. We'll simply add this one to that collection of Celeste fig trees, YouTube. I'm going to slide this one right in there. These, YouTube, are the Celeste fig tree cuttings that we began to propagate about 2 weeks ago. As you can see, the majority of these cuttings are already sprouted out. We'll take you guys back around to our front porch right now and give you an example of what one of those same cuttings looks like here 2 weeks after we potted it up, placed it in a plastic bag, and placed it inside of our greenhouse. Here's one of those cuttings from our greenhouse, YouTube. As you can see, that bag has a lot of condensation on the inside of it. This particular cutting has been in this pot with this bag on it for about 2 weeks now. I'm going to remove this bag right now and show you guys exactly what this particular Celeste fig tree looks like after 2 weeks in this pot, in the plastic bag. Take a look at this. Again, YouTube, it's been approximately 14 days since we began this experiment with this particular cutting. We used the same method on to propagate this particular cutting as we did, as we showed you guys earlier in this video. But take a look at this, YouTube. Can you guys see all of the new growth points that are beginning to bud out on this cutting, YouTube? Can you guys see that? We have 4 different growth tips that have begun to sprout out on this particular Celeste fig tree cutting. Again, it's simple, YouTube. It's very, very, very simple. If you're interested in actually growing or attempting to grow or propagate your own Celeste fig tree cutting, YouTube, we have about 30 or more of these Celeste fig tree cuttings available in our Etsy store, and I'll place a link in the description beneath this video to our Etsy store, to our Celeste fig tree cuttings. Go in there, order your cuttings, follow the instructions in this video, YouTube, and I can promise you, in about 2 weeks, YouTube, you will have the same results in your location as I have here in my location, YouTube. Again, it's simple to do. You just take a cutting, strip the bulk out to the cambium layer over a couple of those growth nodes, apply a little rooting hormone, stick it in a pot, water it in, place a Ziploc bag over it, YouTube, and sit it in a place that receives indirect sunlight for about 2 weeks, and you will indeed have yourself a brand new tree. At any rate, YouTube, thanks for watching, and if indeed you currently are watching this video on fig tree propagation and you're not already subscribed to the Green Thumbs Gardening channel, please indeed take this moment to put that subscribe button beneath this video, that like button, that notification button, and be sure, YouTube, be sure to share this video with your friends and family as well. Yeah, propagating Celeste fig tree cuttings right here at the Green Thumb Gardening channel. Grow Zone 8B in Tifton, Georgia. Thanks for watching.
Now that I got it made. Now that I got it made, now that I got it made, I'm taking it back when rap was real back in the old days. Now that I got it made, now that I got it made, I'm taking it back when rap was real back in the old days. Do you remember this? We call it old school. I'm talking about when rap was real, there was no auto-tunes. You had to really sing, you had to really rap in order to get them up out the seats and make their hands clap. But now it's auto-tunes on everybody's voice you hear. No message mumble rapping, they ain't even speaking clear. But I won't ever change, I keep it old school. They let me in the game and now I make my own rules. Know that I got it made. Got it made. Know that I got it made. Know that I got it made. I'm taking it back when rappers real back in the old days. This one for real rappers, artists like Tupac. He made the whole world feel it before he got shot. This one for real rappers, artists like Biggie Smalls. He reached the world with his music and he touched us all. This one for real rappers, artists like Eazy-E. I miss you, homie, and I know you smiling down at me. This one for real singles, artists like Marvin Gaye. Didn't need no auto-tune to sing, just let the music play. Know that I got it made. Know that I got it made. Know that I got it made.